I was driving across Oklahoma after visiting my sister for the weekend. It was just after 1 a.m., and I hadn't seen another town in nearly 40 minutes. My fuel light suddenly came on. According to my GPS, there was a gas station just 2 miles ahead. When I arrived, the place looked abandoned. Half the lights in the canopy were burned out, and only one pump seemed to be working. There wasn't another customer in sight. I pulled up to pump number 6 and stepped out. The moment I picked up the nozzle, I noticed someone standing on the opposite side of the pump. A man. He wore a dark hoodie with the hood pulled over his face. I hadn't heard him walk up. He simply stood there, perfectly still. "Long drive?" he asked. His voice was calm, too calm. I nodded politely and kept filling my tank. After a few seconds, he asked another question. "You're heading east, aren't you?" I looked at him. "Yeah." He slowly smiled. "Don't!" Before I could ask what he meant, he turned and walked into the darkness behind the station. I assumed he was homeless. Inside the store, I paid for my gas. The young cashier noticed me looking outside. "You talked to him?" I pointed toward the pumps. "The guy in the hoodie." The cashier frowned. "There hasn't been anyone outside all night." I laughed. He was standing at pump 6. The cashier's face immediately changed. Without saying another word, he walked over to the security monitor. He rewound the camera footage. The video showed me standing alone beside my car, talking, nodding, looking directly at empty space. There was nobody else. Every camera angle showed the same thing. I tried convincing myself the cameras had missed him. Then the cashier quietly said, "Pump 6 hasn't worked in years." I stared out the window. I had just filled my entire tank there. He grabbed his keys and walked outside with me. A thick yellow bag covered the pump handle. A faded sign hung from it, "Out of service." My car shouldn't have had a single drop of fuel. Yet when I started the engine, the fuel gauge showed completely full. I drove another 300 miles without stopping once. When I finally reached home, I opened my fuel cap. The tank was empty, but somehow the engine had brought me all the way there anyway. I was driving through rural Kansas after a long business trip. It was almost 2:30 in the morning, and I was struggling to stay awake. My gas tank was nearly empty. So, when I spotted a small station glowing in the distance, I pulled in without thinking twice. The place looked old. 2 pubs, 1 flickering open sign, and an empty parking lot. Inside, a young cashier was stocking shelves. He looked up as I walked in and gave me a tired smile. I grabbed an energy drink and paid for my gas. Before I could leave, he asked, "Which way are you headed?" "North." His smile disappeared. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. "If a black SUV pulls in behind you, don't make eye contact." I laughed awkwardly. "What?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked out the window toward the pumps. "Just leave as soon as you're done." His serious expression stayed with me as I walked back outside. I finished pumping my gas and got into my car. Just as I started the engine, a black SUV slowly rolled into the station. It parked directly behind my car. The headlights stayed on. The engine kept running. No one got out. Remembering the cashier's warning, I shifted into drive. As I pulled away, I glanced in my mirror. The SUV followed. At first, I told myself it was just another traveler. But after 20 minutes, it was still behind me. Every turn I made, every speed change, it matched. The road ahead was completely empty. The only lights came from my taillights and the SUV behind me. Finally, I saw another gas station. It was much larger and brightly lit. I turned in quickly. The SUV slowed. For a second, I thought it was following me inside. Instead, it stopped at the entrance, then reversed. Without ever entering the parking lot, I stood there watching until it disappeared into the darkness. Relieved, I walked inside to grab a coffee. While paying, I casually mentioned the black SUV. The older cashier froze. "You saw it too?" I nodded. He sighed. "You're the 3rd person this month." I asked what he meant. He pointed toward an old newspaper clipping taped behind the register. Years earlier, a family had disappeared on that same highway after stopping for help. From a black SUV. The vehicle was never identified. There were no fingerprints, no license plate, nothing. As I drove home that morning, I kept checking my mirrors. The SUV never came back. But when I reviewed my dashcam footage later that night, the road behind me was completely empty. There was no black SUV, no headlights, nothing following me at all. Then who? Had I been watching in my rearview mirror for 20 miles? I was driving through southern Nevada after attending a friend's wedding. It was nearly 3 a.m., and the highway was almost completely empty. After hours behind the wheel, I spotted an old gas station sitting by itself in the middle of nowhere. The place looked forgotten. Only one pump was working. The convenience store was open, but there wasn't another customer in sight. I filled my tank and decided to use the restroom before getting back on the road. The bathroom was small and poorly lit. The fluorescent light buzzed constantly overhead. As I washed my hands, I glanced into the mirror. For a split second, someone was standing behind me. A tall man wearing a dirty gray jacket. I spun around. The room was empty. I laughed nervously. Lack of sleep, I told myself. I splashed some cold water on my face and looked into the mirror again. This time, there was no one behind me. Relieved, I dried my hands and reached for the door. It wouldn't open. I pulled harder. Still locked. I hadn't heard anyone come in. Then, behind me, I heard slow footsteps. 1, 2, 3. I turned around again. Nothing. The footsteps stopped. The silence was unbearable. A moment later, the mirror fogged over by itself. Slowly, words began to appear. "Don't turn around." My heart started racing. I stared at the message, unable to move. Then I heard breathing, right behind my left shoulder. It was so close that I could feel warm air against my neck. Every instinct told me to look. Instead, I squeezed my eyes shut. After what felt like an eternity, the bathroom door suddenly clicked open. I grabbed the handle and practically ran outside. The cashier looked startled. "You okay?" I nodded, trying to catch my breath. I asked if anyone else had been in the restroom. He frowned. "No? You're the only customer who's been here for the last hour." I didn't tell him what had happened. I just paid for a bottle of water and left. The next morning, while unpacking at home, I noticed something strange. There was a handprint on the back of my jacket. Not dirt, not mud. It looked like ash. 5 long fingerprints stretched across the fabric. I tried washing it. It wouldn't come off. A week later, I stopped at another gas station during the day. While checking my hair in the restroom mirror, I froze. For just a second, the same man in the gray jacket was standing behind me. This time, when I turned around, the bathroom was still empty. But the mirror was smiling. I was driving through eastern Wyoming after finishing a late-night delivery. It was just after 2 a.m., and I was running low on both gas and caffeine. The next gas station was over 50 miles away. So when I spotted a small station sitting beside the highway, I pulled in without hesitation. The parking lot was empty. Every pump was lit, but not a single car was there. The convenience store lights were on too. As I walked toward the entrance, I noticed a handwritten sign taped to the door. "Open, please, come in." I reached for the handle. Locked. I tried again. Still locked. I knocked on the glass. A cashier looked up from behind the counter. He stared at me for a few seconds before slowly shaking his head. Then he pointed behind me. Confused, I turned around. There was nothing there. When I looked back at the cashier, he was frantically waving both hands, not inviting me inside, warning me to leave. A loud knock suddenly echoed against the store window beside me. I jumped. No one was standing there. The sound came again, this time from the opposite side of the building. Then another. It was as if someone invisible was walking around the store, knocking on every window. The cashier rushed to the front door. He unlocked it just enough to whisper, "Get in! Now!" The moment I stepped inside, he locked the door again and pulled the blinds shut. Neither of us spoke. The knocking continued outside. Slow, deliberate, moving from one side of the building to the other. Then it stopped. For nearly a minute, there was complete silence. Suddenly, every gas pump outside turned on by themselves. The digital screens lit up. The fuel nozzles slowly lifted out of their holders, as if invisible hands had picked them up. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The cashier didn't even look surprised. He simply kept staring at the security monitors. After another minute, the pumps returned to normal. The silence came back. Finally, he unlocked the door. "You can go now," he said quietly. I asked him what had just happened. He hesitated before answering. Whatever comes here at night, it can't enter if the doors stay locked. I laughed nervously, assuming he was trying to scare me. Before leaving, I asked if I could use the restroom. He immediately shook his head. There isn't one. As I drove away, curiosity got the better of me. I looked in my side mirror. Behind the building, I clearly saw a large sign. Restrooms. The next day, I checked the station on satellite maps. The building was there. The pumps were there. But according to the property records, the convenience store had been abandoned for nearly 12 years. I was driving through northern Arizona after visiting some friends. It was close to 1:30 a.m. when my fuel light came on. The nearest gas station was a small, isolated place sitting just off the highway. There were only 2 pumps. No other cars. No sound except the wind. I parked, filled my tank, and walked inside to pay. The cashier was an older man watching a row of security monitors. Without taking his eyes off the screens, he asked, "Are you traveling alone?" "Yeah," I replied. He finally looked at me. "That's strange." I frowned. "Why?" He slowly turned one of the monitors toward me. It showed the live camera feed from Pump 2, where my car was parked. I felt my stomach tighten. Standing beside the passenger door was a woman. She wore a long black dress. Her face was hidden beneath her hair. She wasn't moving. I immediately looked through the front window. My car was exactly where I'd left it, but there was no woman. I looked back at the monitor. She was still there, perfectly still. I laughed nervously. The camera must be glitching. The cashier didn't answer. Instead, he switched to another camera. The woman appeared there too. Then another angle. Still standing beside my car, on every camera, she was visible, outside. There was nothing, the cashier quietly said. "Leave through the back door." "What about my car?" "Walk to it. But whatever you do, don't look at the cameras again." His voice sounded serious enough that I listened. I walked outside. The parking lot was empty. No woman, no movement. I got into my car and locked every door. As I pulled away, I accidentally glanced toward the store window. The cashier was still watching the monitors. His face had turned completely pale. A mile down the highway, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the gas station's mobile app. It let customers view the live security cameras. I selected Pump 2. My car was driving down the highway, but the woman was still standing beside it, keeping pace perfectly, without taking a single step. I closed the app immediately. When I reached home just before sunrise, I checked the footage one last time. The recording had automatically saved to my account. My car eventually pulled into my driveway. The woman stopped at the edge of the property. She slowly lifted her head for the first time. Her face wasn't blurred anymore. She was staring directly into the camera. Then she smiled. The video ended. The next morning, I went outside to wash my car. On the passenger side window, someone had written 3 words in the dust. "See you soon." I was driving across rural Mississippi after visiting my uncle. It was almost 2 a.m., and the highway was completely deserted. My gas gauge had dropped below empty, and I was beginning to worry I wouldn't make it to the next town. Just then, I spotted an old gas station sitting alone at the edge of the road. Its sign flickered on and off, barely lighting the parking lot. There were no other cars, no sounds, only the buzz of the overhead lights. I pulled up to the nearest pump and reached for my wallet. Before I could insert my card, the pump suddenly came to life. The screen flashed. "Transaction approved." I frowned. I hadn't even touched the keypad. The numbers on the display started climbing. $5, $10, $20, $30. Gas began flowing into my tank on its own. I looked around, expecting someone to stop me. No one was there. When the pump finally clicked, it showed exactly $100. Confused, I walked inside. The store was empty except for an elderly cashier reading a newspaper. "I think your pump is broken," I said. "It just filled my tank for free." The old man slowly looked up. "No," he whispered. "It wasn't free." I laughed. "My card was never charged." He folded the newspaper and stared at me. "Did the screen say transaction approved before you paid?" I nodded. His expression changed immediately. "You need to leave. Right now." I asked what he meant. Instead of answering, he walked outside with me. He looked at the pump for several seconds before quietly saying, "It always chooses someone." I thought he was joking. I thanked him anyway and drove off. About 15 miles later, my phone buzzed. It was a banking notification. Payment declined. That made no sense. I had plenty of money in my account. Then another notification appeared. Card not recognized. Within seconds, every card linked to my bank account disappeared from my mobile wallet. My banking app logged me out. When I finally contacted the bank the next morning, they couldn't find any account under my name. According to them, I had never been a customer. Panicked. I returned to the gas station later that afternoon. The building was gone. There wasn't even a driveway leading to where it had been. Only an empty field. A local farmer noticed me looking around. I asked him if there had ever been a gas station there. He nodded. Years ago. What happened to it? It burned down. Owner died trying to stop people from using the pumps. I asked when it happened. He looked at me strangely. Exactly 100 years ago today. I still don't know who paid for my gas that night, but sometimes I wonder what they took in return. I was driving through northern Michigan after spending the weekend at a friend's cabin. It was almost 3 a.m. when I stopped at a small gas station just off the highway. The place was unusually quiet. Only one other car was there. An old white sedan parked at pump number 4. Its engine was running. The headlights were on, but there was no driver. I figured someone had gone inside to pay. I filled my tank and walked into the convenience store. The cashier was watching the security monitors. I pointed toward the white sedan. "Someone left their car running!" He looked confused. "What white sedan?" "The one at pump 4. He glanced at the monitor. "There isn't a car at pump 4. I thought he was joking. I walked over to the screen. The camera showed every pump. Mine was there. The others were empty. Pump number 6 had nothing beside it. I looked back through the front window. The white sedan was still outside. Its headlights were shining directly toward the store. "You seriously can't see it?" The cashier slowly shook his head. A strange feeling settled over me. I hurried back outside. As I passed the sedan, I looked through the driver's window. The keys were in the ignition. The radio was playing softly. Not just the driver's seat, every seat. Suddenly, the driver's door creaked open by itself. Just the slow sound of the door opening. I stepped back. Then the radio became crystal clear. A calm voice spoke. "You're looking at tomorrow." Before I could react, the headlights shut off. The engine died. I blinked. The car was gone. Pump number 4 was empty, as if nothing had ever been there. Shaken, I got into my own car and left immediately. The next afternoon, while eating lunch at home, I saw a news report on television. A white sedan had been found abandoned at a gas station in northern Michigan. The driver had disappeared without a trace. Police believed he had simply walked away. Then they showed a photograph of the vehicle. It was the same sedan, same cracked windshield, same dent in the rear bumper. The timestamp on the security image caught my attention. It had been taken at 3:07 a.m. the following night. I checked the receipt from the gas station where I'd stopped. My purchase was made at 3:07 a.m., exactly 24 hours earlier. To this day, I still don't understand what I saw. But every time I stop for gas at night, I always avoid pump number 4, because I'm afraid one night the person missing from that empty car will be me.